welcome. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today. So you're the author of New York Times bestseller, The Age of Grievance, which kind of argues how Americans are obsessing over self-victimization rather than kind of producing civil and productive dialogue. What made you decide to write this book?
I mean, everything that I saw and that I heard around me, you kind of didn't have to look hard or far in American life to see that we were at one another's throats. It felt, the whole climate of the country, the tenor of our interactions felt to me very different from 2 decades prior or from 4 decades prior. And I was just really curious to spend some time thinking about how we got to that point, writing about what I think it's costing us, which is great. I mean, the costs are great. And talking about some ways we might move beyond it. Just felt to me like the timing was right and the need was there.
How does this trend kind of pose a threat to democracy and kind of promote political dysfunction?
Well, I mean, in many ways. For one thing, year after year, you read these stories about how little Congress got done. Congress gets little done, and by the way, sometimes that's a blessing. Not all legislation is good legislation. But we don't attend to our problems, and we don't pass the kind of legislation that we need, in part because of this grievance, because of this dysfunction. And if we don't move beyond it, we're not going to be able to address our problems because with excessive grievance, no compromise is possible. The center doesn't hold, all of those sorts of things. For the most vivid and harrowing manifestation of it, we're living in an age of renewed political violence. And that political violence is sort of the most extreme, the most, just kind of the most vivid example of our inability to relate to one another in productive and peaceful ways. But even interpersonal interactions, and we've seen it on campuses, we've seen it elsewhere, there's this tendency for people to identify according to particular tribes, and when they meet someone else to kind of figure out which tribes does that person belong to or which tribe, and to make judgments and put up walls in response to that. And that just infuses American life with an ugliness that I think we all feel, we all experience, and we all are diminished by.
Mm-hmm. And in this, era of divisiveness, what are some potential solutions, and how can people kind of get out of this age of grievance?
Well, I think we're seeing some solutions right now. We're seeing some efforts right now. Like, let's take social media. Social media is an enormous agent of this, and there is an intensifying and growing louder all the time conversation about how to rein in social media use, how to steer people toward healthier social media use. And so, you all probably know this better than I do, but there is a movement that has gathered force, especially in the last year or two, to take smartphones out of schools, up through secondary schools, middle schools. There's a movement to regulate social media in some ways that I think are important. There's a movement to not allow its use among children below a certain age. I think that's all really, really productive. On the political front, you see a fresh interest and a growing interest in things like ranked choice voting, in things like open or jungle primaries where people don't wear partisan labels. Those could be political reforms that lead to less extreme members of Congress by the time they get there. If you've got these primaries that are one party only and that turn out only the most impassioned partisans, you then end up electing extremist Republicans, extremist Democrats, and they're exactly the people who are not going to be able to sit down and hammer out compromises in Congress. Mm-hmm. Those are some of the things that we're talking about and making steps toward that would be very productive. National Service Program, I think there's gathering interest in doing a truly genuine, large-scale version of that. That would bring together people from diverse backgrounds who otherwise are not crossing paths in American society because we're so sorted and segmented.
Mm-hmm. And kind of shifting gears, you worked for the New York Times for over 25 years and a variety of...
30 years now.
For over 30 years in a variety of roles, including chief restaurant critic, White House correspondent, and op-ed columnist. How did kind of this variety of roles inform your perspective on politics and life?
I don't know. I would like to say I hope, but I have no idea that that it means I don't look at things in as doctrinaire or predictable a fashion, but I don't know. I mean, probably it just means that I'm confused and less coherent than the next person. It means I'm a dilettante who's an expert in nothing.
And you were also the first openly gay op-ed columnist at the Times. What did that distinction mean to you, and how did it inform your writing for the Times?
The distinction, what did it mean to me? I don't know, I really didn't dwell on it much because it's never, gay has never been one of the first 5 adjectives I would give if someone said describe who you are. But I was aware that it was another one of those things that meant that society was becoming more inclusive. And if my appointment was an emblem of that, I was grateful for that. In the beginning, it also meant that not with great regularity, but more often than another columnist, I would write about, say, the marriage equality movement, which in fact was cresting and achieved its greatest victory in the first years that I was a columnist. So I did feel like that's something I should write about because I bring a personal story and a personal perspective on just what it means. So it gave me that sort of sub specialty, but even so, it wasn't the majority of what I wrote about.
And what's the biggest lesson that you want people to take away from tonight's speech?
That to lead with questions like, how have I been wronged? Which is a question for some reason we've encouraged Americans who've been wronged in great ways and some who have not to lead with that question when you're entering the public domain, the public square, not to constantly be looking to appoint villains and victims and looking at the world that way, not to be asking what you're owed and who has wronged you and how they should be punished, but to be thinking of society's aggregate health. You hear the phrase self-care. You don't hear the phrase civic care. I would like people to leave thinking that they need to leaven all their thoughts about me with thoughts about we.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and good luck with your event tonight.
Thank you for your time.